Hey Internet friends, Trevor Starkey here with another episode of TV Thursday, diving in today to my top 10 shows of 2017 as my best of the year content just kind of keeps on going. I really didn't watch all that much in the way of episodic television, especially once kind of we hit maybe like after the spring. I really fell off the wagon there, and really, so most of this list is going to be like bingeable shows. There are a couple episodic things in there here and there, but it's definitely been an interesting kind of twist in what used to be my normal viewing habits of, oh yeah, I'm going to watch the show weekly on Hulu or something like that, and then I'll have a couple binging shows throughout the year. This year was much more mostly bingeable. Up first, we have a few quick honorable mentions. West Wing is one of them. When Quentin and Logan invited me to do a West Wing podcast, West Winging It, now available, episodes 1 and 2. Wink, wink. It was definitely a perfect excuse to hop back into the show and brush up on it. And then, 2 weeks later, I was done with the whole series. So it's a show that even when it slides a little bit too far into its Sorkinisms, still manages to genuinely inspire me. So it lands a spot on this list. Another honorable mention for The Office, which is another one I hopped back into on a whim and just all of a sudden had watched the entire series. Pretty sure it was because Joey Noelle tweeted about it at one point. I absolutely adore the characters on this show, and they've only grown with me more over time as I've worked more and more in office environments themselves, because I just see the archetypes everywhere I go, everywhere I turn in my real life. I didn't include this or The West Wing on the proper list because both of them I've seen multiple times, and so it wasn't going to be a fair fight to really compare across everything else that I saw this year for the first time. Last honorable mention of note is Death Note. I really enjoyed the first 2/3 of Death Note, and then it drastically changed up the dynamic, and it was in a way that just kind of ripped the rug out from under me and never really managed to win me back into the series. So it doesn't crack the top 10, but it was worth mentioning. Number 10, Orange is the New Black. This is one of the very first Netflix shows I ever watched back when Season 1 came out. It was either that or House of Cards. I know they kind of launched back-to-back. But now, with both of them in their 5th season, this was the only one I bothered to continue watching. I just have no real interest in watching Frank Underwood in the era of Trump, and this was before Kevin Spacey's Revelations came out. But I was interested to see how the riot in Litchfield ended up playing out. It was a very different season for the show, with everything kind of taking place over the course of a couple days and much fewer in the way of flashbacks than seasons past. But I still very much love this ensemble, and I love how it has grown and expanded and developed over the years as well. Number 9, Castlevania was way better than I expected it to be. The only reason it's not higher on this list is probably because it's way more of a proof of concept of a show instead of an actual season of a show itself. You're looking at basically 4 episodes that come in under 2 hours. So it would have served better as like, okay, here's like a Castlevania movie that will set up a future season. I think that's effectively what they did, but they broke it up into 4 episodes just because. But the animation was beautiful and grim, and the story, while short, was a good beginning of something that I hope gets its full potential in the next season. Number 8, Silicon Valley. This is something I watched a couple episodes of a few years ago when I was borrowing my then-girlfriend's family's HBO Go stuff. And then I just kind of fell away from it. And so when I picked up HBO this year for Game of Thrones, and this popped up on the menu, I was like, yeah, I'm going to hop back in and watch that. And so I watched the first season, and it's always going to be weird because I was probably one of the very few people who watched betas, which was one of Amazon Prime's like first initial original program attempts. They did basically, there was Animal House, which had John Goodman in it, and it was like a bunch of congressmen or something living in a house as if it was like a frat house-ish kind of thing. And then Betas was the lesser known of the pilots that made it to like a 13-episode season or something like that. And I really enjoyed that. And they both had the same premise. Betas had the same premise as Silicon Valley, and it was like a small startup tech company going from incubation and trying to make it big. And so, like, both of them, I think, are good takes on it. Silicon Valley came out, I think, a year later, and is definitely the one that took off. And I think it's well worth it. It's got some great performances in there, like Kumail Nanjiani and Martin Starr in particular. Number 7, American Vandal. This is a show that really took me back to the days of listening to that first season of Serial, and it was, like, surreal how much it unlocked in the way of those memories of Adnan Syed. I think the show really nailed the true crime documentary vibe that they were kind of lampooning here, and they ended up taking this absurd little idea into a very breakout show. I don't know that they'll be able to capture lightning in a bottle the second time around, but it'll be interesting to see them try. Number 6 is a pseudo-tie between Last Week Tonight and the closer look segments of Seth Meyers, as both of these very much kind of became like must-see viewing for me in the YouTube space in particular. I grouped them together because in the era of Bush, I had like Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert kind of helping me stay sane with the absurd hypocrisy of our political system, and now in the era of Trump, it's been largely John Oliver and Seth Meyers, and there's still a healthy dose of Stephen Colbert's monologues in there as well. And it just kind of became routine. Every day I would come home from work, and there'd be a closer look on whatever topic that Seth Meyers had tackled that day, and so I pulled that video up and watched it. And in the same vein, like, Sundays would become, okay, before I go to bed, I'm going to watch whatever the Last Week Tonight segment was. So I definitely thank them for helping me get through a lot of 2017 so I could just kind of roll my eyes and feel like others were rolling them with me. Number 5, Stranger Things. Season 2 was a great way to continue building this show, I thought. It introduced a handful of new characters, it mixed and matched some of the pairings, and it introduced a big, bad, threatening, new, imposing bad guy. I thought there were a handful of moments here that felt like they were trying to repeat the first season a little bit too much. Most notably, Will's drawings of like the tunnels hanging around the Byers' house didn't have the same punch as the Christmas lights did in season 1, but there was still a lot of fun to be had here. And yes, I agree that the side story with 11 hit at a terrible point in the season in terms of pacing, but it did give Millie Bobby Brown some really great moments to play with, so I can, in the end, look past it. Number 4, My Hero Academia. I'm not quite finished with Season 1 as of recording this, but I've really enjoyed everything about it so far. The idea of basically superhero Hogwarts is awesome, and the characters are fun, the storylines are great, and the quirks are all intriguing and interesting kinds of new abilities that you don't think of necessarily as abilities, but they're really cool, and it's been a really exciting show to check in on week in and week out. In fact, waiting until my weekly Saturday show on anime stuff has been one of the toughest bits, because I'll finish an episode and I'll just want to dive right into the next one. Number 3, Glow. Glow hit at a perfect time for me, because it was just as I was getting back into wrestling. I adore Allison Brie. Mark Maron's dry, sarcastic wit is just always right within my wheelhouse, and the supporting cast of characters here is great as well, and between this and Orange is the New Black, Netflix really nails it with the female-driven ensemble shows. Number 2, Westworld. Westworld is one of those shows that I saw everybody tweeting about back when it originally was airing, and people were amazed by just how often it twisted and turned within a single episode, let alone over the course of a season. People I would see kind of comment and be like, oh man, they would, I could think of other shows that would do that twist, like wait until a season finale to do it or something like that. Fortunately, because I wasn't paying attention to the details when all that was going on, so many of those surprises and twists and turns still hit for me when I watched it here, and I loved pretty much everything about Westworld. Great performances, great direction, great setting, great story, great everything. And number 1, Game of Thrones. The whole reason I got an HBO account, which would let me watch Westworld and Last Week Tonight and Silicon Valley this year, was so that I could watch Game of Thrones in real time this season with everybody else. Since I wasn't watching last season as it happened, there were some key moments that lost a bit of their impact on me since I knew they were coming. I'm a firm believer that a story is more than just a moment that can be spoiled, but all the same, this was a fun thing to jump in and watch as everybody else was watching it, because I also loved watching all of the reaction shows to it. I probably was watching 3 or 4 reaction shows a week after every episode, just to hear other people talk about the show and hear what their theories were and hear their reactions and stuff. So it was a ton of fun. I love that we're at the show's end game, where we've got all these characters coming together now instead of years and years and years that we've had of splitting them apart. And 2018 is going to be a very long year without Westeros, as it was announced today that, yes, it's not going to be back in 2018, it's going to come back in 2019, but I look forward to seeing how it ends then. So those are my 10 favorite shows of this year, shows that I watched this year. As obviously some of you are aware, some of those shows did come out in previous years, but this is the first time I got to Silicon Valley and Westworld and stuff like that. So those are my thoughts on these shows. Let me know what you think about my list, or what your favorite shows of the year were, in the comments below. As always, I've been your host, Trevor Starkey from TrevorTrove.com. You can follow me at SnarkyStarkey on Twitter. And until next time, from here at the Trove, treasure your friends.